Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PatternFly demo. In case you're new today, every couple of weeks we have a demo. It rotates between 9 a.m. EST and 11 a.m. EST every 4 weeks when the rotation occurs. And today we're going to be going into some updates we have to interaction design, visuals, some updates on browser support, CSS, and React. So that's what you can expect to any demo you attend. And again, welcome. I'll be posting this on our YouTube channel afterwards. And I'm going to start with a quick announcement that on February 1st, we released beta. So very exciting news. And I've attached in the agenda our public announcement on our PatternFly.org blog. And feel free to read and get a little bit more familiar about what we released in beta. And so this demo today is a great summation of some final changes we made coming into this beta release. So let's go ahead and kick it off with interaction design. And Matt Carano is going to present alerts and notifications guidelines.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I've been working on drafting design guidelines and working with other folks on getting design documentation ready to present on the PatternFly website once that starts to roll out. So the first thing that well, actually, there's several things that were earlier put in, but this sprint I worked on the alerts and notifications design guideline documentation. So let me just quickly share my screen out.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask if you haven't muted yourself already, go ahead and mute yourself so that we don't get feedback from your keyboard or anything like that. Thank you.
Okay, so alerts and notifications. So this documentation presents usage for the basic alert component. So we can see the alert component can take on a number of states to reflect status, success, warning, danger, or information. And the information on the colors used and the icons used are listed in this document. Also related to that are the alert group, which is a component which allows us to group and position notifications, and also referencing modal message dialogues here as another type of an alert when you really want to block the UI by presenting a modal message. In the usage section, it goes on to talk about when and why to use these different types of alerts. So alerts can be used for inline notifications, toast notifications, and then the modal notification. And this document talks about positioning of those on the screen, when to use, in this case, inline notifications, when to use, when not to use. So inline notifications are generally used to provide feedback for provide synchronous feedback. Toast notifications used to provide asynchronous feedback. Toast notifications are transient, so they will pop up in the upper right corner of the screen and remain for 8 seconds or until the user dismisses them. And we talk about the stacking of multiple notifications, and also when should use a modal notification. So the modal notification basically is means to post an if you have a condition that really the user must address immediately, then the modal notification is the right approach. And then finally, some content guidelines about writing good messages inside of alerts. So there is currently an open PR for this. I am still making updates. If you are interested and you want to read this in detail, the link to the PR is in the agenda. Feel free to leave any comments, and that's about it. Any questions? Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Rachel.
Okay, great. Sorry if there was a pause there. I think I had a little network trouble there for a second. So if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and save questions to the end of the demo. We have a pretty big agenda for today, and I want us to be able to hit everything so you can see what's new. But go ahead and make note of your questions because we'd be happy to answer those at the end of the demo. And Gina, if you'll go ahead and present our colors page.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So I've been working on some of the styles pages for the new site, PatternFly site, and one of them is colors. The main goal of this is kind of a work in progress, and I wanted to first be able to group all the colors so that they were easily categorized. And by doing that, I split them into theme colors. I'm still working on the best way of showing default theme versus dark theme because I needed to show a background on it and it kind of looks weird if I didn't do so with the default theme. But then as we continue, it's alert colors and then typography colors and then the chart color system, which I'm not sure if everybody had seen, but Michael did a really cool presentation on how that whole system works, even though the designers don't really need to know how it works because it's mostly through the code. I think it's good to show just how it works in general. So I took a first pass of that as well, but I'm still working on it and just showed some steps of how it's created once you put it into context. But if anybody has any comments or any other ways that you think I should group these at all, feel free to comment on the Envision project, which I linked in the demo agenda.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gina. I see some encouraging comments coming in on the chat. That's awesome. Kyle on visuals is going to present wizard design.
Great. Here. So this is the new wizard design. So it's going to look similar to what we had before with the old wizard, but a few different, with a few exceptions. The goal here is to make this as simple to implement as possible. So with the last wizard, we had a bunch of trouble with trying to stack this bar horizontally. And so when you would condense the screen down in the responsive states, there was issues with the arrows working and there was getting horizontal scroll bars, and it ended up being not ideal. So we went back to the drawing board. Also, we went back to the drawing board for we had the concept of a simple wizard and a progressive wizard, but now we've grouped them both into one container design. So the interaction's a little bit different, but you're going to see that here in a second. But the container is the same, and it's all for simplicity of development, to make it easier on everybody. So you see here modal, same modal, but we do have a simple white column with this simple stacked steps. What we did was we went back to look at what PatternFly 3 had because that worked really well, even from a development perspective. So we tried to mirror some of what's there, but even simplify that even more. So there was like 3 more states for these outlines and circles and all kinds of stuff, and then a vertical alignment. We got rid of all that to make it as simple as possible, and it's going to be really flexible. So basically, you're going to get a form in here, and you could take this and put it in a full screen or a modal if you like, or whatever kind of scenario, but it's really flexible to be able to accommodate that. In this scenario, we're just clicking through each step, and it's going to work like a standard wizard. And then in this step, you would click step 2 and it would give you sub steps. So we simply just offset that to match everything else that we have in PatternFly 4. But we have the simplicity of not having a bunch of highlights and overlays, and then this is more accessible than PatternFly 3 was as well, and the previous version. So here, in this scenario, you don't know what the next steps are, so we're going to create a new thing, right? And then it's going to give you the steps as we go, right? Because you don't know what the next steps are. Different interaction, same exact structure and code. And then this is going to give you step 3, and then you're going to get your additional sub steps here, and then of course you're going to get a review, right? And then just showing that you can accommodate up to, like, you could however many sub steps you like, and you could just get a scroll bar. And then we're making a selection there, and this is again just showing that we've made it different. We have a different set of content here, and a different count of steps. Then this is a review, and you can put whatever layout you want in here. It's super flexible to accommodate all of the layouts that we have, multiple columns, single column. You can put a big gray column on the right here, whatever you want. And then here's our simple, it's like a modified empty state just to show that we're making progress with a placeholder text, and then that the function was successful. And that's really it. We also have in this bar here, so on the mobile state, when you shrink this down, you're just going to get exactly the same as PatternFly 3. So I met with Michael Coker, said this is entirely possible, and it's already something we perfected with PatternFly 3. We're just going to show the step that you're on, and then the sub step right next to that, similar to how the breadcrumb is, except it's just going to be showing you that it's there. And you can just click anywhere here, get this drop down, same as PatternFly 3, and then you're just going to get a drop down menu with those steps in it. It is repeated, but these are clickable. And then you could click whatever step you want to go to there, or just close this. But very simple, similar to PatternFly 3, and we know it will work. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Kyle. Michael with Copy to Clipboard.
Hey, so I'm going to share the design for Copy to Clipboard, and later on in the demo, Christy is going to show the implementation. Okay, so it's pretty quick, pretty simple, and very similar to the PatternFly 3 pattern. It's a pretty common pattern that you see everywhere across different UIs, but so we're not really straying too far from that. But the first thing to note is that it can come in both a regular input field or read-only input field. The reason for the read-only is because we still want the user to be able to copy the text manually if for whatever reason they want to copy only a part of it. But we also want it to work on regular text input fields as well. So as you can see, it basically looks a lot like an input group component, but it's not an input group component, it's its own thing. I'll let Christy talk more about that for her presentation, but just something to note. And it's basically just this little icon on the right, the standard Font Awesome 5 copy icon. When you hover over it, you get the hover state for the button, and then you also get a little tooltip here, just explaining what that is. That would also come up on focus, of course. And then also the rest of all of my examples have just the read-only state, but you can imagine the regular input field state as well. You click it and you get this success message. The tooltip, this would be a temporary thing. It would either go away in a couple seconds or just go away when you mouse off of the button. This is where we stray a little bit from the PatternFly 3 pattern. In PatternFly 3, the icon actually switches to a check mark to represent that you copied it. But we thought that felt a little too final, just in case sometimes you might want to hit the button a few times just to really nail it down. And if something goes wrong, you might have to come back and hit the button again. So we wanted to keep the button, and instead of the feedback being the icon, we made the feedback the tooltip. And I think that should be enough. And then there's a second part to this pattern, which is this expansion panel. And this is for cases where the text is overflowing the space of the input, and you want to see the whole thing. And it basically works like very similar to a drop-down list, but instead of a list, it's just text. And again, the user could go in there and manually highlight part of it if they'd rather do that, or they can just click the icon and copy all of it. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael. And Michael's back then on browser support.
Hello, everyone. Let me share this screen. So yeah, last we met, we gave an update on the IE11 support. We had made a good bit of progress on that, and we've basically had a few people go through that guide, and we've gotten some really good feedback on it. So we've made, applied all the feedback and basically promoted that guide to the wiki for core. So I'll just paste this into the chat so everyone can find it. So it's here. I'd love for anyone and everyone that's interested to give this a drive and just see if you can get through this successfully, and if there's any issues you run into, or things that you think would could be improved by adding more notes or something like that, we'd love to hear. The one thing I want to point out is this step right here. This is a really important step. So what this little chunk of code is basically it's our fallbacks. So we rely on the use of CSS variables to kind of propagate styling changes throughout the DOM, and IE does not support those. So to make this whole thing work, you basically need to add fallback styles for the places where we're relying on variables. So what this blob of CSS is, it really will basically it'll get you to a functioning full page layout. This gives you fallbacks for all of the components that you find in our full page layout example. I think I linked to it somewhere in here. Don't know exactly where, but basically this will get you that far. And then as you go beyond that and you start using components that don't exist in that full page basic layout, you're likely to run into some of the same types of issues that we've already resolved. And basically it's just a matter of following suit and just doing this exact same thing for all of the other properties that won't work out of the box. And so my hope is that at some point in the future this style sheet will be provided as part of core. It's not yet. Right now it's this is basically the official place where you'll find all of these styles, and as we define more fallback styles, we'll come back and we'll update this wiki, and so this will grow. And at some point, like I said, it'd be great if we could get it into core so that people could just consume a style sheet and have that happen as an automated fashion. So just a heads up. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of information in here, but we broke the whole process down into 10 steps. Tried to get it under 10. 10 was as low as we could go without making each step really big. So yeah, just give it a run, give it a read when you get time, and let us know what you think. That's it.
Great, thanks, Michael. And on CSS, Christy has a variety of components to present today.
Hi guys. Some of the work I've been doing was pre-beta, and then some of it has been completed after beta. So to begin with, this is the accordion component, and it acts like the nav component that we currently have, but these links don't link out to the page. They actually link to content within the accordion component itself. So basically these are buttons with a heading component wrapped around them. And then each one of them actually includes the expanded content within it. When it has the PFM expanded modifier, it expands out like this. The toggle rotates, the text changes to blue, and it gets this blue border on the left, which you'll see with a lot of our components in PF next. They have this blue border on the left. And then this is the hover and active state for any of these. And this is the standard component, and then there's also a modified component, and you can add PFM fixed to this expanded content area, and it gives it a max height and scrollable. So that's the accordion. This was, yeah, post beta. And then copy to clipboard. So Michael did a really good explanation of this, so there's not too much to explain. But right now I've only implemented the read-only example, so I'm going to also have the other example there where you can edit the text. And then this is the button for the copy to clipboard. When you hover over it, that blue line changes there. And then React will handle the tooltip, which will, when I hover, it'll say copy to clipboard, and then when I've clicked on it, it'll say successfully copied. And then this is the expanded version here. So it's not required, but you can add the toggle here to handle your overflowed content. So basically it's just, it repeats the text that is in here. And that's just a div element there. And then the context selector. So it acts as, it's quite similar to the select components that we have, but it sits as a drop down in the nav. And basically the menu items inside of here are dependent on the context of the page that this component is in. So say this exact component would be the same on every page in the nav, and then as the pages change, the content inside of here it can change too. And I assume that it handles a lot of content, so that's why it has this max height here, and allows it to be scrollable. And then there's also a search feature here, which it's an input group, and you can search within your drop down here through all those items. And that was pre-beta. And then expandable example. So basically it's made of two sections. So the first section is above the show less toggle, and that's will always be there. And then the second section is the expandable section, so that toggles on and off as you click on this expandable toggle. So show less and show more, and it just updates there when you've expanded it. And then the expandable component has a footer, and the footer always remains at the bottom, no matter if it's expanded or not. And in this case, it has a button inside of it. And this PR is a work in progress because the design had forms with different widths. So for example, this line, there was expiration date, and it was about 40% of what it is now, and the CVV was also up on that line. So we're creating a PR to handle this change in the form and form component so that we can have different widths for the forms. And this is the alert demo. So thanks to Michael Coker for helping me here. And Andy had created the alert group component. And so basically with the PFM toast modifier, you can use it on a page, and it sits at the end of the DOM order. So this is the page, and then it sits underneath it. And we added a Z index to it so that it's the highest, always the highest on the page. So when I scroll, move my browser like this, it always sits above everything, even the nav. And then React will handle how these animate in. And then another thing, pre-beta, we just made some updates to the switch so that it was more obvious if it was checked or not. So before, this was a darker gray, so you couldn't really tell if it was on or off. And this just said label, and then there was no check icon, and these colors were different. So now instead of label, the text changes from on and off, and we handle that with a pseudo element in the CSS to change the content there. And that's something we usually don't do in core. React usually handles it, but we thought it was necessary for the switch component. And then you can see this is a lighter gray now too. So it just kind of adds to the effect that it's either on or off. And when no label is used, you can use a check icon to show that it's turned on. And then the disabled colors look a lot better now. It's more obvious that they can't be touched. So that is it.
Thanks so much, Christy. And Michael Cooker.
Hey. Okay. All right. First up is the about modal. It's a pretty straightforward change. We just moved the copyright text to the bottom. It used to be up the top underneath the title between the content. So we moved it to the bottom here. It just stays at the bottom of the modal. And then if there's more content in the modal that causes the modal area to scroll like this, then the copyright just remains at the bottom. The next was that we had a checkbox component previously that handled both radio inputs and checkbox inputs. And so we just separated that component, the check component, into a check and a radio component, to where checks are only in the check component, radios are only in the radio component, though functionally at the moment they're basically the same component. Next was some changes to the modal box, particularly just regarding the widths, and then a modifier that we use to control the width. So by default, the modal box used to be a minimum or a max width of around 500 or 600 pixels, and so it would display the way that this modal box is displaying currently. And so we made the modal box just be 100% width by default, so it'll consume the available window or container that it's in. And then we've added a modifier to display it in the small version like this. And then we had a modifier existing already that was a large modifier, so it would display it like this, which is a little bit more visible if I go there. And this also allows us to, since previously the modal box width was always defined by a max height, or I'm sorry, a max width, that didn't allow you to specify a custom width to it if you wanted to, because it would never grow wider than the max width. And so by leaving the default modal box with only a width of 100% and no max width, this allows the React implementation to pass, you can pass a width prop to the component and then specify a width if you want your own custom width for a modal. And then up next was, this is something that's a work in progress, but it's super straightforward. It's just a tab content component. It's basically the content area pairing to the existing tab component, where you have tabs as like a content switcher. This is a component that we'll use to control the tab content panels that are shown when you click on different tabs. And that's basically it. I also just wanted to say real quick, in the last demo, I went over a lot of work that was a work in progress for beta. And so none of it was really, or most of it wasn't out on the system to where you could see. But I just wanted to follow up on that and say the splint button dropdown, it's in the existing dropdown component, just a different variation that allows you to have a bunch of interactive elements inside of a dropdown instead of just a single dropdown toggle. That's in the system. You can see that all this stuff would be on the pf4.patternfly.org website. The next was a new component that we created. It's very similar to a select component and a dropdown component, but kind of somewhere in between them, and it's called an options menu. And so you can see examples of that here. This is our flex layout system. So it's a really flexible row layout system that basically just uses Flexbox to separate elements inside of it with custom spacing that you can just use classes and some responsive modifiers to control. Then this didn't work last time because I was in the middle of doing something else, but this is up on the site now. The Patternfly 3 icons that we use in Patternfly 4 are now available in an icon font. And you can get there just by clicking on the icons link at the top of the site. And you see the name, the code to use, what the icon looks like. The toolbar, there are a bunch of different variations of our toolbar now that you can go through the examples. They look something like this. So you have a toolbar on the left and pagination on the right. And then this also leads to the last one, which is pagination. You can see a couple of examples of that on the website now too. Just go to the pagination component, but it basically just looks like this. And that's it.
All right, thanks, Michael. And Matt Carlton.
Okay. All right. So, excuse me.
first thing I wanted to show was just a simple update that we made to the chip component, where in the designs we had the option to add a badge into the chip, and we didn't have that available in the existing chip. So we have that now, so you can drop a badge into those and it'll work. And then the next one was, the update to the about modal. So we had discovered by doing work on the about modal that when there was a lot of content in here, like in the content section, this image just kind of stretched to match the height of that content, which was obviously not very ideal. So now it won't ever grow larger than this. It's just a fixed image. So when there's a lot of content, like if I scroll here and if I shrink this down, I get a scroll bar, you'll see that the image doesn't stretch, it just is fixed in the position. Also, now we have the sticky close button here, which wasn't before. It would just scroll out of the board, so now it's just stuck there, so you can always close it regardless of size of it. The next one is accessibility updates to chip. So chip before was, I believe what it was before was just a div with divs inside of it, and now we've made it so it's an unordered list. It can be a single div if it's a single, like a one-off chip, but you can, in the chip group now, it's an unordered list with list items as chips, and it can be nested, and it's way more friendly now for screen readers. And then the last one was truncated text for dropdowns. This is still an open PR, but I think it'll get closed pretty quickly. This is something that we did have previously. Basically, what we wanted to do was make it so the text inside of a dropdown could be truncated, but we don't want to force a fixed width on that. So basically what happens is the toggle text has a wrapper around it, and depending on the context in which this dropdown gets used, it can set a max width on it, but everything is kind of baked into that, the drop-down toggle in order to be able to do that. So you just need to figure out what you want your max width to be. So for example, in the page demo, we have a user profile drop-down. I'll get this here. Yeah, so here, if I were to make this text like super, super long, it would truncate eventually because we have set a max width on this. So now the drop down is capable of doing that. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And Dana.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So just a couple things that we did just for the beta, where you're seeing my screen. So we changed the location of what we call our workspace. This is not our final PatternFly 4 website, but it's a place where you can get information about the components in progress, especially the HTML and CSS. So now we're using pf4.patternfly.org instead of the pf-next, which we've always wanted to move away from the -next everywhere. So this is our first pass at clearing that out of everything. So this is the site we'd want to use and not use that other website anymore as well. So I wanted to point that out. And then the other thing along with that change is we are dropping the use of the PatternFly-next NPM package. So starting with, I think it's 1.0.177, we've moved all the releases over to the long-term location for PatternFly for CSS code, which is here. Within the next week or so, we're going to mark the PatternFly-next package as deprecated, so people will start to get notices when they run npm install that it's not the one that they should use and point them over here. But want to give everyone a week or two to move over on their own as well. So if you encounter any problems with this package or anything moving forward, please let us know. And we hadn't really been truly honoring the semantic release guidelines because it was an alpha technically up until this point. But for breaking changes, we're actively avoiding those as best we can, but we also intend on doing a full version bump if we do introduce breaking changes in the future. So we're not stuck on the 1.x line. That doesn't really mean anything other than just providing information to consumers so they know whether or not the package includes breaking changes as we move forward. So this is a pretty big deal, and eventually we'll walk away from that GitHub repo, the Patternfly-Next repo, and turn our Patternfly repo into what we call a mono repo. So we'll have Patternfly 3 and Patternfly 4 code side by side in various package directories in there. But that's still several months out, but just so that knows that that's coming down the line. So again, that's it for that. Marking our beta release.
Great, thanks, Dana. And then on the React side, we have Ian with chip group updates.
Hey guys. Ooh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm having trouble sharing my screen for some reason. Can you come back to me?
Sure, and if you want to if you want me to share from my end, I can do that as well. I can just click on the link.
Yes, actually, it's on my local machine, so that won't work at this point. But yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll come right back. And Dana?
Back to me already? All right.
Yep.
Okay, so let me show something else then. And want to talk about this is a change that's coming in the next day or so as soon as, let's see, do you see the NPM site here, Rachel?
Yes, I can see
Or
it.
React charts? Okay. So something we're introducing for all of our Patternfly 4 packages on the React side is we're going to be redirecting the NPM packages into what we call a pre-release channel. So you see, we did this with React charts for 1.4.3. And what that's going to let us do is right now it happens to match what's on latest. So when you run npm install Patternfly/React charts, you get whatever is latest by default. So we wanted to protect the community a little from changes that aren't as closely tested as we'd like. So we're going to be putting all changes into the pre-release channel. So you can opt into that channel if you're so inclined, or take those manually. But then what we'll be doing with things that follow the regular NPM update cycle, or will be every week on Wednesday, we'll be validating these releases, and then we'll be manually promoting a validated pre-release package to latest. And our plan is to do that Wednesday morning. But again, those packages will still be there for anyone that wants to use them, but we're just not going to have an extra effort of testing those except once a week, really putting them into a few Red Hat products that we work with and making sure that there's no breaking changes for the community as part of providing an additional validation step. So just wanted to let everyone know there's a PR up to introduce that change right now, and we're sort of waiting for a few other things to go in, and then we'll be adopting this as our workflow on the React side. So that's all. Hopefully I gave Ian enough time, but if not.
I think so.
Okay.
Thanks, Dana.
Yep.
All
We'll
right,
filibuster
Ian.
for a little longer. There we go.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. So here we go. The chip group updates. I wanted to add an update to show how someone would use a chip group in the real world. So you see the code here. There's actually an array of objects, and in each object there's two properties, one for the category name and then one for the chips array. So in the example, you're using the 3 chip components that I've created. The chip group is sort of just the wrapper. You pass a Boolean in to signify, or to tell the chip group that it's going to use the toolbar classes form core. And then inside of the wrapper, you use the React map method or the JavaScript array map method to create a new DOM element for each chip group object that we have here in the array. And within that, you're going to create a new chip group toolbar item that's going to get your category name from each iteration of the map function, and you can sort of see it in real time here. For each category, we have a chip group toolbar, and I wired up a delete item function that'll show how you can actually delete items inside of a toolbar. And on the last item, there's a hook you can see for removing the outer parent, which is the toolbar item, once you remove the last chip inside of the toolbar. And yeah, along the same lines of chip updates, there's the notion of combining the chip and the chip group into one component, which this is sort of just a preview of that sort of layout here. So you can see the toolbar or the tool chip showing for longer chips here, and there's also a badge chip group example that adds the badge styling from core. I think there's one more push from core that needs to happen to get the red style applied, or maybe there's something on the React side we need to add. But yeah, I think that's it for this. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian. All right, that's it for folks who are presenting. And so I'm curious, are there any questions we may have from community members on what you've seen today? Anything you'd like to follow up on?
I have a question on the charts, Dan Denelbreck. So Kyle created some high fidelity mocks for cost management, and they have some gray colors in there, which represents previous month's data. I'm just curious if we're going to have a grayscale for the charts as well as all those pretty colors.
Dan, probably not. I made that before Michael had made this color system, so we'll have to go back and revisit that so that way we can make sure it syncs with the new color system.
All right, so no gray colors.
No.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have one question about the copy to clipboard component. I noticed in the designs, and I think in the implementation, it was pretty much the canned response of like copied to clipboard. And I know this is something we ran into a little while back when we were doing this in the Angular repositories. Basically, we kind of found that if there are multiple copy components on a single page, the response of copied to clipboard is a little bit ambiguous, because like what was copied to clipboard. Do we have the ability on the React side to like pass in, maybe a string that would let the user know what exactly was copied to clipboard, or is that built in some way?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way the copy to clipboard works is the last thing you copied will always replace whatever was on the clipboard, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
So what type of messaging are you looking for?
Sure. Yeah, I just realized I probably didn't give the full story. So it's mainly a concern for like screen reader users, because they can't really see the text, that's as part of the visual element. So when they get the feedback, copy to clipboard, or even better examples, when they place focus on that button, if it just says copy to clipboard, they don't really, it's hard to really understand, like, what exactly are they about to copy. So they can find out, they could kind of like navigate through the DOM and manually find that input and kind of read the contents of that. It may be a little, it's a bit much, if there's like a, kind of like a brief description of what that contents is, if it's a SSH key or a personal access token or a URL, it's something simple as like, copied URL to clipboard or copied personal access token to clipboard. becomes
Yeah.
really helpful.
I wonder if we could just take that data from the input field header, if there's one. Label,
Yeah.
I should say.
So we did go down that route, and it can I think it's good if we have the ability to customize that text. That was kind of the approach I took initially when we were doing this in PatternFly NG, and there just ended up being scenarios where maybe the title was very long, or maybe it just didn't flow very well in the the description. So I'm not suggesting exactly what to do, but maybe it could use a little bit of thought there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good concern. Definitely think more about that.
Cool, thank you.
All right, any more questions from the group?
There's a question in the chat.
Is there any planned support for Vue in the future?
Not in the immediate roadmap, no. But one of the things that's happened with PatternFly over the years is if community feels that they want to follow the design patterns and provide something, approach us and look for a place to host a repo, that we're always open to that conversation. But as far as dedicating developers are working on the React side to a different JavaScript language, that would be hard to find resources right now for an effort like that in the near term.
Okay, anything else, folks? All right, I'm going to point you to the demo agenda. Thank you so much for joining today. I've included a link to our forum, and that will forever live at the top of our demo agenda now. And we really encourage you, if questions come up, to go ahead and post in that forum. That's something that we are visiting frequently and can answer your questions there. So thank you so much for tuning in. And again, I'll send this out to our channels. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Goodbye.